Okay. So you know how sometimes you just daydream about like, packing your bags and just trading your current view for like, I don't know, fjords.
Oh, yeah? Hmm.
Well, we're talking Norway today, and today's deep dive is all about like getting you there.
All right.
Specifically, we're going to go deep on the Norway work visa process using the Norway Work Visa Process 2025 complete guide from newsno.com.
Sounds good.
If you're already thinking about working in Norway,
Yeah.
consider this your shortcut to like really understanding how to get there.
It's almost like a choose your own adventure novel when it comes to visas.
Oh yeah,
Norway offers quite a selection.
it's true. Skilled worker visa, seasonal worker visa, job seeker visa.
It's true.
Like it goes on and on.
Yeah.
It's almost overwhelming, honestly.
It can be.
So where do you even begin?
I think that's where strategy comes in. You got to think about what you want long term. Are you just testing the waters, or are you looking to like really put down roots? Because some visas, particularly the skilled worker visa, are designed with a path to permanent residency in mind.
Oh, permanent residency. Now you're talking.
Yeah.
That's a game changer.
It is.
But I'm guessing it's not as simple as just like picking a visa and hoping for the best, right?
No. Yeah.
What are some of the like less obvious things I should be thinking about?
Well, for example, let's talk about the salary equivalence requirement.
Okay.
It's not enough to just have like a job offer in hand.
Okay.
You have to show them that your salary matches what a Norwegian in a similar role would earn.
Makes sense in terms of like protecting, local workers and making sure wages are fair.
Absolutely.
But how do you even figure out what the going rate is for like a particular job in Norway?
That's where your research comes in. Websites like Glassdoor or Salary Explorer can give you a general idea.
Hmm.
But reaching out to professional networks in your field or even contacting companies directly can give you much more specific insights.
So it's about being proactive and resourceful. Makes sense. What else should I be aware of?
Well, another interesting one is the accommodation interest points system.
Okay.
It's not as strict as needing a signed lease before you arrive,
Right.
but you do need to show them that you have a clear plan in place for housing.
It's more about showing that you've like thought it through. You're not just showing up and hoping to find a place to crash.
Right.
What would count as like demonstrating that in practical terms?
A few things. It could be anything from like evidence of property searches, contact info for potential landlords, or even proof of temporary accommodation arrangements.
Okay.
Basically, you're showing them that you're taking it seriously and you have a plan.
Okay. That's good to know. So I've got my plan, but then comes the paperwork, right?
Right.
I'm assuming there's a mountain of documents they need.
It's not Everest, but there are some essentials. Your
Yeah.
passport, educational transcripts,
No.
work experience verification, that kind of thing.
Got it.
Plus, you'll need to show them that you've got language proficiency, which can be either in Norwegian or English.
And this is all done online, right? I remember reading that in the guide.
Yes, the entire application process is handled through the UDI website. It's actually quite user-friendly.
Okay.
But you know how it is with online forms? Attention to detail is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a misplaced click or an incomplete field can cause delays.
So it's all about being organized and making sure I have all my ducks in a row before I even start the application.
Exactly. Think of it like preparing for a big exam.
Okay.
You want to gather all your materials beforehand, double-check everything,
Right?
and go in with a calm and focused mindset.
Okay, exam metaphor. I like it.
Good.
But before I start cramming, I need to know what I'm studying for, right?
Of course.
Tell me about the types of work visas and like which ones might be a good fit for someone like me who's, serious about potentially living in Norway long term.
Okay, let's explore that the skilled worker visa is definitely a strong contender if you're aiming for that permanent residency.
Okay.
But the job seeker visa could also be a good option depending on your field of experience. It allows you to actually be in Norway while you're looking for work.
Wait, hold on. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like a test drive before you commit to a full move.
Right.
What kind of person would the job seeker visa be best for?
It's particularly attractive, I'd say, for people with very specialized skills that might not be as easily assessed remotely.
Hmm.
Being physically present allows for in-person networking and interviews, which can be so valuable in a competitive job market.
So for someone in like a niche field, the job seeker visa might be the best way to like get their foot in the door and make those crucial connections.
Exactly. It lets you showcase your expertise firsthand, get a feel for the work culture, and ultimately increase your chances of landing that perfect job.
So this is starting to feel like a real possibility.
It is.
But before we get too carried away, I know there's some very specific requirements for each type of visa,
Yeah,
and I want to make sure we cover those in detail.
absolutely. Let's break them down one by one.
Okay.
Starting with the skilled worker visa, since that seems to be a top contender for you. What are some of your initial questions and concerns about that specific visa category?
Well,
Yeah,
let me think for a second here.
sure.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
well, let me think for a second here. Okay, so besides the salary equivalence thing and the accommodation plan we talked about, what else do they look at when they're like assessing a skilled worker visa application?
Okay, well, education and work experience are definitely key. They're going to look closely at your transcripts and references to make sure you really have the skills your potential employer says you do. And this is where understanding the nuances of the Norwegian job market is so important.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, certain professions are way more regulated in Norway than in other countries, like, for example, teaching or healthcare.
Okay,
Often require additional certifications or licenses that might not directly translate to what you have from back home.
so even if I'm like a qualified teacher or nurse where I'm from, I might need to take extra steps to be eligible to work in those professions in Norway.
Exactly, and that's something you'd want to research really early on. The UDI website actually outlines the specific requirements for a ton of different professions.
Oh.
Or you could reach out to the relevant professional bodies in Norway directly for guidance.
So it's about being proactive and understanding the specific requirements of my profession within like the Norwegian context.
Precisely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
What about the job seeker visa? Then what are the key things I should be thinking about for that one?
Okay, so the job seeker visa is a bit more flexible since you don't need that job offer up front.
Right.
But you still got to show them a strong likelihood of finding employment in Norway within that visa's validity period.
So is that just a free pass to hang out in Norway for 6 months?
No,
They're still looking for evidence that you're serious about working there.
absolutely. They want to see a well-structured plan outlining your target industries, the skills you bring, and your networking strategy. Think of it like a business plan for your job search in Norway.
Okay, so I've got to treat my job seeker visa application like a serious proposal, showing them I've got a clear vision and a solid strategy for finding work.
Right. And another crucial thing for both the skilled worker and the job seeker visas is that financial soundness requirement.
Right. We touched on that earlier. It's about proving I can support myself financially, even if I haven't landed a job yet.
Exactly. And the amount needed can change depending on the length of stay.
Okay.
And whether you're bringing dependents with you, the UDI website lists the specific numbers, but it's always smart to have a buffer beyond the minimum, just in case.
That's a smart move. So it's not just about having enough to like scrape by.
Right.
It's about having a cushion to ensure a smooth transition and just like some peace of mind.
Exactly. It shows the authorities that you've really thought things through and are ready for the realities of living in a new country.
Okay, all of this is really helpful. So let's say I've done my research, I meet the requirements, I've gathered all my documents, and I've submitted my application. Now comes the hard part, waiting, right?
The waiting game is definitely part of the process, and it can be nerve-wracking, but you can track your application status online through your UDI account.
Okay, good. At least I can see where things stand and hopefully get a sense of the timeline. But let's say worst case scenario, my application is rejected. What then?
Don't panic. Rejection doesn't always mean the end of the road. The first step is to carefully read that rejection letter to see the specific reasons for the decision.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's as simple as a missing document or a small error that can be easily fixed.
So it's about taking a breath and not jumping to conclusions before I fully understand what's going on.
Exactly. And if you think the decision wasn't fair or there's been a misunderstanding, you have the right to appeal.
Okay.
The UDI website has detailed info on the appeals process, including deadlines and the documents you need.
So even if I hit a bump in the road, there's still a path forward and a chance to like make my case.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that the system is designed to be fair and to make sure all applicants are treated equally. So if you think your application wasn't looked at properly, the appeals process is there to give it a second look.
This is giving me a lot more confidence to tackle this whole process. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the why behind all of this. Let's say I successfully go through the visa process and I find myself living and working in Norway. What can I expect?
The joys of Norwegian life. We've touched on some of the benefits already, like the high living standards,
Yes.
the strong social safety net, and that incredible work-life balance.
Yeah, those were definitely big selling points. But paint me a more detailed picture. What is like daily life in Norway actually look like?
Well, for starters, Norwegians have a deep connection to nature, and they totally embrace this concept of friluftsliv, which basically means open air living.
So I can expect to see lots of people outdoors even when it's cold.
Absolutely, hiking, skiing, kayaking, camping, these are all part of the culture, and it's a fantastic way to experience the natural beauty of Norway.
I'm already picturing myself sipping coffee by a fjord surrounded by mountains. What about the
Yeah.
social side of things? What are Norwegians like as people?
Norwegians are generally known for being a bit reserved, but friendly. They really value honesty, equality, and a strong work ethic, and they have this quirky sense of humor that you'll grow to love.
So it might take a little time to break into social circles, but once you do, you'll find a warm and welcoming community.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to start conversations, even if it feels awkward at first. Norwegians appreciate the effort, and you'll find that most people are happy to chat and share their insights about life in Norway.
So be myself, be open to new experiences, and embrace the opportunity to learn from a different culture. That sounds like a recipe for a pretty amazing adventure. But what about the practicalities? What about the cost of living? I've heard rumors that Norway can be quite expensive.
Yeah, those rumors aren't entirely unfounded. Norway is a high-income country, and the cost of living reflects that housing, groceries, and transportation can be a lot more expensive than in many other places.
Okay, so those high salaries we've been hearing about might be balanced out by the higher costs of everyday living. What are some of the key things to consider in terms of budgeting for life in Norway?
Housing is usually the biggest expense, especially in the big cities. Renting or buying property can be competitive, so you really need to start researching early and include those costs in your overall financial plan.
So even if I get a great job offer, I need to do my homework and really understand the housing market to make sure it all adds up. What about other costs?
Groceries can also be more expensive than you're used to, especially for imported goods. But on the plus side, Norwegian supermarkets often have really high quality produce and local specialties that are worth trying.
Okay, so embrace the local cuisine and maybe cut back on those imported snacks.
Yeah.
What about transportation? Is it easy to get around without a car?
Norway has a really good public transportation system, especially in the cities. Trains, buses, and trams are reliable and efficient, and many cities are also super bike friendly.
Okay.
Of course, having a car gives you more freedom, but it's not a necessity for daily life in many parts of Norway.
So it sounds like I could potentially manage without a car, at least at first. That's good to know because I imagine car ownership adds a whole other layer of expenses in Norway.
You're right, car ownership means not just the purchase price, but also insurance, fuel, and maintenance, which can add up in Norway.
Okay, so factor in those potential costs, prioritize public transportation, and maybe rethink the car decision once I'm settled and have a better idea of my needs and budget.
Exactly. It's all about making informed choices and finding the right balance between the lifestyle you want and the money you have.
All of this is incredibly helpful in painting a realistic picture of what to expect. It's exciting, but also a bit daunting to think about making such a big move.
It's a big decision for sure, but remember, the Norwegian government has created a system that's designed to attract and welcome skilled workers from all over the world. They recognize the value you bring, and they have things in place to help you integrate into Norwegian society.
That's reassuring to hear. But even with the best systems in place, I imagine there are still some challenges that come with adapting to a new culture and a new way of life. What are some of the things that people often find difficult when they first move to Norway?
Well, the language barrier can be a hurdle, even though a lot of Norwegians speak English learning. Even basic Norwegian can make daily life much easier and help you connect with people on a deeper level.
It's about showing respect for the culture and making an effort to communicate in their language, even if it's just a few words.
Exactly. And don't be shy about asking for help or clarification. Norwegians are generally patient and understanding, and they like it when people try to learn their language.
So embrace the learning process. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and use every chance I get to practice my Norwegian-ness. Got it. What about other potential challenges?
The long, dark winters can be tough for some people, especially if you're coming from a place with lots of sunshine.
Okay, so be prepared for a change in daylight hours and maybe invest in one of those SAD lamps. Any other tips for surviving in Norwegian winter?
Embrace the concept of koselig, which is all about creating a warm and cozy atmosphere inside.
Okay.
Think candles, warm blankets, good company, and lots of yummy food and drinks.
That sounds pretty great, actually.
Yeah.
What about making friends and building a social life in Norway? I imagine that can be tricky in a new country, especially with a culture that's known for being a bit reserved.
It can take time, but there are tons of ways to meet people, join clubs or activities that you enjoy, volunteer in your community, or just start conversations with people you meet in your everyday life.
So be proactive, put myself out there,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to step outside my comfort zone. I can do that. But what about the bigger picture? What are some of the long-term things I should be thinking about if I'm seriously considering making Norway my permanent home?
That's a great question, and it leads us perfectly to the next part of our conversation, the path to permanent residency and what comes after.
Okay, so we've covered like a ton of
Yeah.
ground, from like the initial application to actually like living in Norway.
Yeah.
But for like, those of us who are really thinking big, let's talk about the long game.
Okay.
Like what's the path to getting permanent residency and, ultimately making Norway like a forever home?
That's where things get really interesting. As we mentioned earlier, the skilled worker visa is often like the most direct route to permanent residency.
Okay.
After 3 years of continuous living and working in Norway on this visa, you can apply for a permanent residence permit.
So 3 years of like proving yourself, contributing to society, and like really embracing the whole Norwegian way of life.
Right.
What happens after that?
Well, a permanent residence permit gives you the right to live and work in Norway indefinitely,
Wow.
with pretty much the same rights and benefits as a Norwegian citizen. It's a huge step.
That sounds like the ultimate goal. But I'm guessing there are still some hoops to jump through.
There are, but they're usually not as strict as the initial work visa requirements you'll need to show continued financial stability, a decent understanding of the Norwegian language, and of course, a clean criminal record.
So it's about showing them you've really become a part of society, you're a responsible resident, and you're committed to making Norway home.
Exactly. And once you have that permanent residence permit, you can relax knowing you have a secure future in Norway.
That must feel amazing. Is there anything beyond the permanent residence permit? Is there like an ultimate level of belonging in Norway?
There is, for those who really want to solidify their connection to Norway, there's the option of applying for citizenship.
Wow. So like actually becoming a Norwegian citizen? What does that involve?
It's a big step, and the requirements are pretty specific. You'll need to have lived in Norway for a certain number of years, have a really good grasp of Norwegian, pass a civics test, and show a real commitment to Norwegian values and society.
So it's not just about paperwork. It's about understanding and really embracing what it means to be Norwegian.
Exactly. Citizenship is about more than just your legal status. It's about a deep sense of belonging and connection to Norway.
That's powerful. So for anyone listening who's just starting to think about working in Norway, this whole journey could lead to full citizenship and a completely new life.
It's a fantastic opportunity, and it's possible for anyone who's willing to put in the effort and embrace the journey. But let's go back to those just starting out. What advice would you give them based on everything we've talked about today?
Well, first I'd say do your research. Don't just rely on the basic info you find online. Like dig deeper. Understand the details of the Norwegian job market. Look into specific companies or industries that fit your skills and connect with people who are already living and working in Norway.
That's great advice. Networking is so important. Talking to people who've been through it, who understand the culture and the job market, can give you insights you won't find anywhere else.
Right. And beyond the practical stuff, I'd also encourage them to think about their motivations. Like, why Norway? What are they hoping to get out of this experience? Because it's more than just a job. It could be a life-changing move.
Absolutely. It's about figuring out how your personal goals match up with what Norway has to offer. Are you looking for better work-life balance, a deeper connection with nature, a sense of community, or a chance to be part of a society that values equality and sustainability?
Yeah, because understanding your why will help you make decisions and keep you motivated as you deal with the ups and downs of this amazing journey.
Well said. And remember, even if the path seems long and complicated, the rewards can be incredible. Norway is a welcoming place for people who are open-minded, willing to learn, and want to contribute to their society.
So for those who are ready for an adventure, Norway's waiting. This has been such a great deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about the work visa process, but also about what makes Norway such a unique place.
It's been great talking about this with you, and for everyone listening, remember that the journey of 1,000 fjords starts with a single step.
Until next time, happy exploring.